matzah is your unleavened bread. And yes.
Why does it have to be the mom?
It's just a family, it's a family feast. So on the matzah plate, you would have 3 pieces of matzah bread. Now, apparently, they stopped selling matzah at Sedar. And they only sell it everywhere in Fresno around Easter time, which was really rude. So I attempted to make matzah bread last night. So we're just gonna go with the way it looks. But there are 3 pieces of matzah that are separated by nice cloth. And matzah is, well, it's circular in shape. We're just gonna go with it. I could pick a better one. But again, it's just flour and water. And then you pat it out, roll it out, stick a fork in it 2 many times. You put it in the oven close to the top for 2 minutes on each side. And then you anoint it with olive oil and sprinkle salt on it. So you'll all have your own matzah bread. Okay. And if it doesn't taste good, we'll blame Kaylee. My daughter, I know. Okay, so that's your matzah plate with your 3 pieces of matzah bread. It looks pretty all the olive oil is greasing up my fabric. Okay, what else do we have here? So we have our Haggadah, which means the telling. Okay, and then we'll have an extra cup that I don't have, but we're going to pretend that this is our extra cup. And that extra cup of wine will be for Elijah, the prophet Elijah. Because remember, the Jewish people were and still are waiting for the Messiah to come. And they believe that before the Messiah comes, Elijah will come. And so in the Passover, there's a point where they pour the cup for Elijah. Many times they'll have a place setting, an empty place setting for Elijah. And at one point during the Seder meal, they will open the door to welcome Elijah. And if he's not there, then at the end they say, you know, next year in Jerusalem. Next year maybe Elijah will be here. Next year we will celebrate in Jerusalem and the Messiah will be here. So we have an extra cup. This is our extra cup. There you go. Beautiful, right? Yes, and that is why people asked John the Baptist if he was Elijah. Because he was talking about the Messiah coming, and they're like, okay, well, are you Elijah? Because remember, they're looking for some very specific things, and they still today, in a Messiah, there are requirements for the Messiah. There's a checklist, right? And so in the New Testament, in Acts, I believe, they talked a lot about different people who were posing as Messiah and what would happen to them. But the Messiah was supposed to be a new Moses, who was going to deliver people in a new Exodus, which requires a new Passover. And he was going to bring his people out of slavery, out of bondage, whatever that was. And so in Jesus' time, many people thought that the Messiah was going to bring them out of the slavery and bondage of the Roman government, and they were looking for a military Messiah. They weren't expecting Jesus. But we're going to see when we finish with this part, we're going to see how Jesus really fulfills a whole lot. He fulfills everything. Okay, so jumping around a little bit with that one. Sorry about that. All right, so blah, 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 blah. Okay, there are 4 cups total during the meal. And, you know, like I said, there are different variations of the Passover Seder meal. But there are some things that stay the same. And the first is that there are always 4 cups of wine. And that's super important for us when we talk about Jesus. 4 cups of wine because there are 4 stages of our delivery. There are 4 stages of delivery from Egypt. I want you to take a look at Exodus. I didn't mark it. That's really sad. Hold on. Give me a minute. Exodus 6. Go to Exodus 6. We're going to go backwards a little bit. Exodus 6. Verse 6. I'll actually back up a little bit to verse 4. You have the blessing over the matzah, and the very first thing you're going to do is you would be given some bitter herb, which would be like some horseradish, yummy, something to represent the bitterness of slavery, and you would kind of smear it in or dip it into your matzah, and you would eat that. And then you would also make kind of a matzah sandwich using the cheroset, which is the yummy apple, pear, nuts, and wine paste. you'd make a sandwich, much like you would kind of go in between bricks, because the matzah is a little brick-like. But you would make a little matzah sandwich and eat that. And again, everything had symbolism. And at that point, the Passover meal would be served. So we would take a break, we'd munch on, pizza and Ruffles, right? After the meal, we have the afikomen, where our little kid could find that matzah that we hid. And then we have a blessing after the Passover meal. And we come to now the fourth cup. And this cup is super important. Actually, the third and fourth cup are super important for us as Catholic Christians. Kind of gets me excited. Okay, so the fourth cup is the cup of consummation, or the cup of rejoicing. At this point, this is the last cup of wine of the meal. Okay? Now, don't think that you're going to get completely sloshed at the Seder meal, because you're not going to fill it up to, well, some families might, but you're not like chopping off.
Yeah.
Okay. So a fourth cup is filled, and another cup is set in the middle of the table for Elijah, and it's filled for Elijah. Okay? Set in the middle of the table, the door is open to welcome Elijah, and he's not there, right? Bummer. But then your whole mentality is next year we'll be in Jerusalem. Next year. You sing some psalms of praise, the Hallel. The psalms of praise are Psalms 115 to 118. And what's really cool is, if you think about it, Jesus was doing this in the upper room, right? Jesus was leading this Passover meal. Jesus was singing Psalms 115 to 118. You should read those, because when you read them thinking that Jesus was reading them when he's about to be arrested and crucified, it's going to blow your mind. It's going to blow your mind. So after you recite the Hallel and you go through Psalms 115 to 118, and I actually wrote it.
Read them.
Well, all of them? We'll get back to it. We'll get back to it. I promise. I promise. I promise. So after you sing that, you say, next year in Jerusalem, you sing some more songs of rejoicing, and the meal is over. Okay? So it's a really beautiful tradition. Again, remember, there are lots of different variations, but the essentials, the ceremonial plate, the symbolic foods, the 4 cups of wine, the matzah, the rules of unleavened bread, those are all going to remain the same. Okay? Go ahead.
Sorry, so who exactly are they expecting when they open the door? Like, are
Elijah.
they expecting to see, well, yes, but like a modern day Elijah, or a back in the day, because what if they open the door and it's Jehovah's Witness that coincidentally?
I'm sure they're expecting something to blow
They
them
said there's
away.
a checkoff list. Remember?
That's
I mean,
the Messiah.
That's for the Messiah.
Somebody who can
Yeah,
identify themselves
but
as
I bet you it's
I
probably.
think the key is, they always expect Elijah to come in the spirit of Elijah.
Yes, so it's going to be pretty clear in your face, dude, that's Elijah, and not
And
Joe.
when you
from
open it, you
downstairs.
know that the spirit of Elijah is not going to take that a couple of
Mhm. Yeah. Yes.
Then Elijah didn't speak Spanish.
The cup of Elijah? I don't know. It doesn't ever say they drink it.
Because the ones
It's
that
for
come in my
Elijah.
house all speak Spanish, or I
So,
tell most people
I don't know.
Spanish. They're okay.
I know someone's going to drink it. Someone's going to take one for the take it to more modern times. Let's talk about what happened with Jesus, okay? Because it's so important to know about Passover, even in this limited way, because when you go to Mass on Sunday, you're going to be just like, oh my gosh, look at that, okay? What was Jesus doing in the upper room? What did he say? What did he do? Remember, he's a perfect Jew, right? He's leading that Passover supper. It wasn't anybody else, right? He was the guy doing all the prayers and lifting the matzah and passing stuff around and running the meal, right? And there wasn't a Haggadah at that time, a book that told him what to do. It was just, you knew what to do because you were born in that tradition. So there was a definite order to the meal. The meal that Jesus celebrated with his disciples did have 4 cups. It did have ceremonial foods. It did have matzah. It did have the unleavened bread. So it did have those elements. And if you know the general order of a Seder meal, and then you read the account of the Last Supper, you can kind of tell where he is in that meal. And that's super important. Because imagine this, we have a missal, and the missal tells us how the Mass should go, right? So imagine you go to Holy Family, in Kingsbury, and Father Greg is saying the Mass, and all of a sudden he changes up the order, changes the words, and makes it about himself. Half of you would either get up or you'd have your jaw on the floor out of shock, right? So what does Jesus do in the upper room? Let's look. Let's take a look at Matthew,
my
Mark, and
body.
Luke, and John
This is
all
my blood.
talk about what happened, but they give different details. Let's take a look at Luke first, because Luke probably gives more complete information. Let's take a look at Luke chapter 22. Just take a minute, try to figure out, based on that description, where we are in the supper.
I like this one.
The first cup, no?
Say again?
In the first cup?
Well, let's see, says if we look at verse 17, and likewise the cup after they had eaten. At what point in the Seder meal do they stop to eat the meal? After the second cup, right? So he shares the second cup with them, and then he shares the third cup with them, right? And does he say, "Blessed are you, Lord God, ruler of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine," and that's it, and move on? He took it a step further. What did he say? This is my blood. And did he move beyond the prayer over the matzah? Blessed are you, Lord God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. This is my body. So he did what Father Greg would freak us out by doing with the missal. And he completely turned the Passover on its head in front of his disciples, and he said, "Hey, I'm the one you're waiting for. In case you didn't get it already. This is me. I am the sacrifice. This is my body. This is my blood." It just got real, y'all, right? And they've been with him for 3 years, so they're like, okay, things like this have happened before. We're just going to go with it. Nobody got up and left, right? They wouldn't fully comprehend everything in
Just
order
like
for
the-
salvation to be complete.
Just like the Passover.
And that's taken millennia for people to understand, right?
Right.
So that's why I'm saying the disciples around that table were probably jaw to the ground, thinking, "Oh man, something serious just happened here. This is huge," and we're still unpacking it today, right? How do you comprehend that? Yeah, I don't know.
And it's quite the same thing, because their jaw dropping is the saying, "This is me that you're going to eat."
Right.
Okay, the same thing to us when we go to church.
Right.
When we go up there, are you saying I'm eating him, or am I eating bread and drinking wine? Are you actually going up there to say I'm eating his body and drinking his blood? It's hard for us to figure out. How do you think it was for them? They're like this, what are you saying?
So here's my next question for you. Taking a look at what we've had described here in Luke. Did he finish the meal?
Not
What happened? It said he said a couple of things. He said, "I'm not going to drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom comes."
When you guys on the cross.
And then he took the cup, and then he took the bread and said the blessing and broke it. And then he didn't drink the third cup of wine. And do they even have a fourth cup? No, they do the halal and they leave and they go to the Garden of Gethsemane. He didn't even finish it. Why would he not hold on to that? You're on it. He didn't even finish the Passover meal, right? And so they're like, okay, I guess we're leaving. And they get up, right? They sing the Hallel, they do their psalms, and then they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, right? And let's look at what they do. For this one, I actually want you to go to Matthew. I want you to go to Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. Verse 36. Because again, remember, he didn't, the last cup that he dealt with is the third cup, which is called the cup of blessing.
Okay, so he did drink the third cup.
He did not.
He did not.
He did
stopped
not
at the
drink. He
second.
stopped at the second.
Oh.
He did not drink the third cup. Everybody else participated in it, but he did not drink it. After the second, he said he's not going to drink again of the fruit of the vine
The kingdom.
until his kingdom comes, right? So now let's take a look. Matthew 26, verse 36. Then Jesus came with them to the place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples,
26, I'm sorry.
Matthew 26, verse 36.
The agony
The agony in the garden. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter along and the two sons of Zebedee and began to feel sorrow and distress. He said to them, my soul is sorrowful even to death. Remain here and keep watch with me." He advanced a little and fell prostrate in prayer, saying, "My Father, if it is yet possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. Let this cup pass from me." And if you go down, I'll just keep reading. When he returned to his disciples, he found them asleep. He said to Peter, "So you could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not undergo the test. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Withdrawing a second time, he prayed again, "My Father, if it is not possible that this cup pass without my drinking it, your will be done." He hasn't finished the Passover meal. He hasn't finished that fourth cup. What's the name of the fourth cup? The fourth cup is the cup of consummation. Right? So then let's take a look. Let's go to John. Can we go to John real quick?
So excited.
John 19. John 19. Because John 19 gives probably the most complete part of this part of his crucifixion. So we're going to go to John 19 and we're going to start at 23. John 19, verse 23. John 19, verse 23. Okay? When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 shares, a share for each soldier. They also took his tunic, but the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top down. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it will be, in order that the passage of Scripture might be fulfilled, that they divided my garments among them, and for my vesture they cast lots." This is what the soldiers did. Standing by the cross of Jesus was his mother and his mother's sister Mary and the wife of Clopas and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." He said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her and was home. After this, aware that everything was now finished, in order that Scripture might be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I thirst." There was a vessel filled with common wine, so they put it on a sponge soaked. They put a sponge soaked with wine on a sprig of hyssop. Where did we hear hyssop before? When they sprinkled the doorpost with the blood, right? And put it up to his mouth. When Jesus had taken the wine, he said, "It is finished." And bowing his head, he handed over the spirit. Not that his life was over. He wasn't saying it is finished, his life is over. He was saying the sacrifice is complete. The Passover meal is done. It is finished. This is the cup of consummation. Isn't that cool?
Uh-huh. We're gonna need a break right now.
It should be a movie. That's why I think that he was present there, but he wasn't actually the bread and the wine. Because he didn't finish the Passover, he went and then sacrificed himself.
Okay.
But
That's a good point
that's
too.
that's
That's for
what I got from it.
bigger minds than
Then me
it's
too.
higher than my pay grade. So the power of what happens in the Last Supper and what happens at the cross, you don't know it unless you really have a kind of even a general understanding of the Passover supper that he was celebrating and where he was in the meal and what he did and more importantly what he didn't do and why.
And the last time we talked about the word consummate was when Isaac went in with Leah and he consummated the marriage. It was so he gave all of himself to her and he took all of her, so it was a bride and a groom. So it's Jesus the bridegroom and his church the bride, and he had given his life for us. So consummate means it is finished, it means this is sealed, it is forever. So there's a whole bunch of meaning in all of that.
And isn't it in one of St. Paul's letters, he says, the cup of blessing which we bless, isn't it a participation in the blood of Christ? He even identifies, the last cup that was from the Passover meal, the cup of blessing, right? So that's the cup that we in our Eucharistic celebration are dealing with, is the cup of blessing. The third cup?
The third cup is the cup of
The
Yeah,
second
the fourth cup is the
The
consummation.
third cup is the cup of blessing, yes, I'm sorry. So the third cup is that last cup before he said, meal's over, you'll understand later, right? And there are so many things in the New Testament, in Paul and in Acts, that you read now when you think about the Passover itself, and it's just so much more rich. Yes.
This is Petrie.
Oh my gosh, Brent Petrie, Jesus and the Jewish roots of the Eucharist, this is what I used to teach when I was teaching.
Great.
But going through it, I've forgotten half of it, I need to read it again, but there are a couple of really cool things. The first thing to remember is that a lot of our Christian brothers and sisters have removed the idea of sacrifice from the Eucharist, okay? And they look at that as almost disgusting. But the Jewish people, when the temple was still existing, understood that sacrifice was a part of the meal. Think about this. When you're celebrating Passover, even in Jesus' lifetime, you go to the temple in Jerusalem, you get your lamb, and it's killed, and the blood is sprinkled, all the rites are done, and you take your lamb home. But everybody has to go to Jerusalem to do that, right? So this is a description from Josephus. He says, he's describing what Passover looks like in the temple. He's visiting Jerusalem and he's describing this. And this is, he says, so the high priests, upon the coming of their feast, which is called the Passover, when they slay their sacrifices from the 9th hour, about 3 p.m., to the 11th, about 5 p.m. So that accompany not less than 10 belonging to every sacrifice. So 10 people per sacrifice, 10 people per lamb that's being sacrificed. For it is not lawful for them to feast singularly by themselves. They have to feast in like family groups. And many of us are 20 in company, found the number of sacrifices in that 2-hour period to be 256,500 lambs.
In 8 hours? Or whatever.
It's from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m.
That would practically be a river of blood.
That would be, can you imagine the sound and the smell and the sights of that? They understood that the Passover was about sacrifice. It was bloody. It wasn't a get-together potluck.
I read.
Oh my gosh, Brent Petrie, Jesus and the Jewish roots of the Eucharist, this is what I used to teach when I was teaching.
Great.
But going through it, I've forgotten half of it, I need to read it again, but there are a couple of really cool things. The first thing to remember is that a lot of our Christian brothers and sisters have removed the idea of sacrifice from the Eucharist, okay? And they look at that as almost disgusting. But the Jewish people, when the temple was still existing, understood that sacrifice was a part of the meal. Think about this. When you're celebrating Passover, even in Jesus' lifetime, you go to the temple in Jerusalem, you get your lamb, and it's killed, and the blood is sprinkled, all the rites are done, and you take your lamb home. But everybody has to go to Jerusalem to do that, right? So this is a description from Josephus. He says, he's describing what Passover looks like in the temple. He's visiting Jerusalem and he's describing this. And this is, he says, so the high priests, upon the coming of their feast, which is called the Passover, when they slay their sacrifices from the 9th hour, about 3 p.m., to the 11th, about 5 p.m. So that accompany not less than 10 belonging to every sacrifice. So 10 people per sacrifice, 10 people per lamb that's being sacrificed. For it is not lawful for them to feast singularly by themselves. They have to feast in like family groups. And many of us are 20 in company, found the number of sacrifices in that 2-hour period to be 256,500 lambs.
In 8 hours? Or whatever.
It's from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m.
That would practically be a river of blood.
That would be, can you imagine the sound and the smell and the sights of that? They understood that the Passover was about sacrifice. It was bloody. It wasn't a get-together potluck.
I really think
We have evidence that in the 1st century AD, the Passover lambs in the temple were not only sacrificed, but they were, so to speak, crucified. As the Israeli scholar Joseph Tabari has shown, according to the Mishnah, that Jewish text that I told you, at the time when the temple still stood, after the sacrifice of the lamb, the Jews would drive thin, smooth staves of wood through the shoulders of the lamb in order to hang it and skin it. In addition to the first rod, they would also thrust a skewer of pomegranate wood through the Passover lamb from its mouth to its buttocks.
cross.
They would call that the crucifix. They would. Justin Martyr says, "For the lamb which is roasted dressed up in the form of a cross." Wow! How cool is that, right?
That was before Jesus?
That was during Jesus' time.